now I would go to the next step, and that's our panel. I give it over to Martijn Arets. Martijn Arets is our gig specialist in the Wage Indicator team. Martijn, go ahead with your panelist.
Yeah, thank you very much, Pauline, for this introduction, and also Kirsten. Also, thank you very much for your introduction and your thoughts about the tool. So the next 35 minutes, we're going to have a discussion with a panel, which I also will introduce. So it's a conversation from different perspectives from the gig economy, but also from different parts of the world. Because as Pauline also mentioned, the tool today is launched for Indonesia, Pakistan, and Kenya. And if you have any questions, just put them in the chat, and if we have time, we will take them in also in the discussion, because we have also some time for questions. And if your question isn't being answered, then one of the panelists will then answer them also in the chat afterwards. So first, I want to start introducing the panel, and the first I want to introduce is Nadia Praditasari. She's a labor advocate and a data-driven expert for over 10 years of experience in the labor fields, dedicated to advancing workers' rights, improving labor conditions, and fostering data-driven social dialogue in the workplace. And she also brings in the perspective from Indonesia. So Nadia, welcome. Good that you're here.
Yes, good to be here.
Yeah, good to be here. Thank you very much for joining us. The second panelist is Iftikhar Ahmad. Iftikhar Ahmad is a comparative labor law expert and founder of the Center of Labor Research in Pakistan. He leads the labor law team at WageIndicator, where he helps raise awareness about labor rights in more than 100 countries. So Iftikhar, also good that you're here, and also compliments for your beautiful background again. And then the third speaker is Anne Gichuku. She has different roles. She's from Nairobi, Kenya. She's a gig economy specialist, because she's a gig worker, a gig trainer, but also a gig researcher. So she's diving in different roles in the gig economy. Her ultimate career goal is to serve as a project manager and trainer, helping to shape the gig economy into a more efficient and equitable marketplace. And was also interviewed in the role as an online gig worker for the Living Tariff Tool in Kenya. So welcome everybody. So first,
Thank you.
Yeah, good you all here. It's also really nice to have all these different perspectives from all over the world here also represented during this webinar. My first question is to Nadia about the process of developing the tool and the conversation with the workers. Can you take us a bit more into the process? Because people, they now see the end result, and they can also go to the websites and also play with the tool. But can you give us some more insight in the conversation with the workers and the developing of the tool? And also, why do you then think that the Living Tariff Tool is important, and also for who?
Okay, thank you, Martin, for the question. And I would like to thanks as well the WageIndicator and GIZ for giving me the opportunity to share the process and discussion that we have with the gig workers. And as explained by Pauline before, WageIndicator have been developing living wage database in many countries since 2014. And based off those cost of living data provided in the living wage database, we then created the Living Tariff Tool specifically for the self-employed and also the gig workers. Some might wonder why in creating a special tool for the gig workers. As it's obvious that because of the situation for the gig workers are very much different from the formal workers. So in addition to the living wage that we already have, we also need to consider other variable costs and that are relevant for the gig workers. And not to mention that there are a variety of gig work type of job out there. So there are more complexity in it. So because of that complexity, while developing this tool, of course, we wanted to make sure that this Living Tariff Tool is applicable for as many self-employed and gig workers out there. And with that in mind, we talked to a lot of gig workers, unions, academics, association, online online drivers associations, other relevant stakeholders. We've done this not only in one country, but 3 countries, Indonesia, Pakistan, and Kenya. And from that conversation, the Living Tariff Tool has been getting quite a lot of feedback and constructive suggestion from a bunch of gig workers who did the testing on this tool. So one of which is saying that it needs to be more customizable because everyone's have their own unique situation and needs. Every gig workers have their own unique situations. So which later on we accommodate in the tool. In the future, of course, they still are going to keep evolving based on the feedback from the user. So we're going to keep listening and making improvements to the tools. And about your other question, what makes the living tariff important? So if you're gig workers, you need the living tariff because it breaks down your work-related expensive costs, the hidden costs that sometimes you miss. And it shows you how much you should be making to live a decent life. We're also been hearing some of the great feedback, specifically from freelancer who find clients outside from the platform. They are saying that no information about living tariff are super helpful in figuring out how much they should charge for their work, when usually they rely a lot on communities to get this information, but having an easy and free access tools are making it way easier for them. So yeah, knowing the living tariff are giving the workers like the power to make the smart and informed decision about how much their decent tariff should be.
Yeah,
Hope that
thanks. That's
answer your question.
so. What I take out of it is also the complexity. And I think also when people we will also share the links in the chat later on. Really go explore the tool. They will also see how complex it is. But you also say, okay, it's also to multi-stakeholders. Okay, so the tool is made as simple as possible, but behind it, it's really complex.
Yes.
Which you also can see on the different data points that are in the tool, because every data point has a database behind. So it's not just
exactly.
like
Yes.
let's put it here, but it's really well thought. What you also mentioned. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, and the cool thing is also behind all of this complexity, there also flexibility on it, where you can also modify your numbers, your costs, because yeah, according to this, like everybody have their own needs and situations.
Yeah, it's a good one, which you also could see also in the video. So at the third page, you can also just play with the cost when you think some costs are for your situation lower or higher. What you also emphasize is also the multi-stakeholder, what you also say the different stakeholders that were also involved within the production of the tool. So not only the work, but also the unions, government officials, platforms. And I think that's really important to do. And the last thing I also want to summarize also from your contribution is that in the end, the gig, so the living tariff doesn't mean that there needs to be a platform involved or not, because in the end it's the work that somebody does and the cost that somebody made, and it's now we focus on the platforms, but in the end it's about the work that's being executed in that.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So thanks for that. And then also to Anne, can you also maybe describe because many people they think, okay, gig economy, it's the same in every country, and also especially with many discussions on global, people are only looking to Europe and to Northern America. But as we all know, the world is much bigger and much more interesting than only those 2 continents. So can you also maybe give some insights about the gig economy landscape in Kenya, and also how do you think a living tariff can have impact over there?
Thank you so much, Martin. So the gig economy landscape cannot be explained. The proliferation is set against the background that Kenya has a lot of issues with employment, and getting into mainstream employment can be an issue. In fact, right now, I think this year alone, we've had about 70,000 layoffs, which makes it a bit hard for everyone to get into the mainstream kind of work. This is where gig economy is, this is the background that the gig economy is set up against. And so when we started, I remember when I started in 2016, we had just a few items that you could do in the online space, but right now it has grown remarkably to diversify into the ride-hailing services, and we have the freelance, jobs like article writing, academic writing. We have transcription now, web design, and all that jazz. And with this diversification comes the employment opportunities, which means also the employment opportunities have gone up, almost tripled, with the proliferation of the gig economy, which is a good thing. However, that being said, we also have a lot of challenges. The gig economy here is plagued by a lot of challenges, and mostly we have the issues of the wage disparities, and we also have what is a decent living, what is a decent standard of living. Even a lot of people don't get to make a decent standard of living, and so those challenges, that's how the living tariff plays into the gig economy space in Kenya, because it will help gig workers and essentially equip them with essential information that they need about what is the minimum wage that you need, or what is the minimum income that you need to be able to maintain a decent standard of living. And also it will help, Kenya, we have a lot of opaque and varied wage structures, and so this will give us a standard against which workers can be able to gauge, this is a earning I should be able to make in order to be able to make a decent living in the end. I think it will also help policymakers, and most especially platform workers, to be able to provide this decent and kind of standardized kind of wage. And it will also just give a clearer understanding of what constitutes a decent standard of living or a decent living wage for gig workers. And so they can be able to effectively negotiate. That gives them an arm or a hand in negotiations. And just by setting this benchmark of what is a decent living wage, then of course people will want to be able to give more equitable compensation practices. And so this is a win for each and every gig worker, and especially for the old ones, not so much, because we already know how the market should be and what the market entails. But for new people who are entering the gig market, then these equitable compensation practices should be put in place so that they can be able to benefit from that. And just this data and benchmarks that we will get from the living tariff will also just help inform policymakers on how they can better regulate the gig economy and just how they can better it. That is my view. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. Really nice touch points to talk about, and also what you also say. And maybe that's also a way of maybe the language we also need to think about in the debates, because we are always used to use the word benchmark. But I think in the end also with the living tariff, it's maybe also the bottom line. What people should earn at least to have a decent life. So I think also myself also need to think about, okay, how can we use the right words, because in the end, when you say benchmark, then you can also say, okay, but maybe we can go below the benchmark, because it's just a kind of a line, and maybe good also to see if we just can go also a bottom line in that. So thanks also really for this answer, and also going to Iftikhar. The basis of a living tariff is a living wage, and ingredients, and also they're also really based on elements from the employment relationship. And you're also having a really good legal background. So what is your view on this? And also, what are the national institution differences that you also experience also while developing these kind of tools in different places of the world?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, WageIndicator and GIZ for this great opportunity. I believe that as I have always been of the view that the legislation for the formal sector is still the basis. That will always remain as the standard. Why? Because it's easier to refer to. You already have some standards. Yes, the companies, they can always claim these are independent contractors. They will claim, because obviously there's so much of a cost difference that I would like to show as well in some time. But the fundamentals, even in this tool, they come from the labor law. For example, the annual holidays, the public holidays, the working hours. The living wage itself obviously is based on an individual standard working hours. Similarly, when we look at the social security contributions are again coming from the labor law, because the labor law is already giving you a background standard that would be required. The actual issue that I see is that even when the living tariff, with the living tariff, if the workers are able to make that high amount and the companies do this, would they be able to access the kind of social security that we are considering in the living tariff tool? No. Why? Because if the legislation does not allow self-employed workers to self-register and self-contribute, it will not happen. Even when it is optional, for example, in some countries, it is optional, but when it is optional, a young worker would like to keep money with themselves rather than contributing to the system. Unless it is a compulsory social insurance system in which self-employed or so-called independent contractors from the platform work, they are asked to contribute in the system, as well as the companies, not only the workers. The companies should also act. So if you ask me, I think the task is still pending with the governments. The task is not pending with the platforms, with the workers. It has to be done by the government. Even with this living tariff tool, if the governments don't allow workers, the platform workers, to self-register and self-contribute, the higher incomes that they might get would not lead to this social production that we are thinking of.
Yeah, good. So what you say, okay, it's good that we all develop different tools, but in the end, it also needs to be adapted and also secured within like regulation, because that is the basis. And maybe now the regulation is maybe a bit too much focused on the labor contract and not on the worker. So maybe that is something that can be changed. Do you have some thoughts about that?
Yes. Although some years ago, my view was that the platform workers should be given all the workplace rights that a normal worker would have. I have seen that we need to start somewhere, and that starting place should be the social security. This is where we should start. We should start giving the social protection as well as higher wages, obviously. I would like to show you something, because this is really important, because yes, living tariff tool, it's a wonderful idea, but then at the same time, we also need to see how much difference it would create if companies are required to pay living tariff. One moment.
Yeah, you're going to share a slide. So one moment, everybody. Yeah, there it is. Really good. Or it's on its way.
Okay. So I just wanted to show you that this is currently the first bar is the minimum wage, 154 rupees per hour. What we are proposing under the living tariff is 418 rupees. It is 272% higher than the current minimum wage. The platform workers are not even paid the minimum wage. How would it happen? Or why would platforms pay more? Similarly, if you look at the living wage, 233 rupees, and if you compare it with the living tariff that we are proposing, including social security, it is again 180% higher. And this is also showing that this is the cost to an employer to engage a normal worker. By not acting, the governments are promoting unfair competition between the platforms and normal employers who have to bear all these costs, the work-related costs, the social security contributions cost. So to remove this unfair competition that they are supposed to do, the governments should act, and they should ensure that what I would not suggest is to raise the minimum wages or the living wages in one go. But yes, they should have a plan that in the next 2, 3, or 5 years, they would ensure that the minimum wages are raised to a level that so that the workers, the platform workers, have a decent life.
Okay, thanks for sharing this, Iftikhar. I think it's already also really important that's also to understand that it's also, of course, the responsibility of many stakeholders to make it work for the workers. And also, and I think that's also nice about the tool, that it also can give all the stakeholders a kind of a proof. Okay, this is when you would pay people fairly. Should be the rates, probably is much higher than in many cases right now. But in the end, yeah, that's also the bar we are setting. And also maybe also Nadia and also we are also talking a lot about, okay, we need to attract different kind of stakeholders. So at what way do you think that's maybe start with you first, Nadia. In Indonesia, you can use the Living Tariff Tool to make a change and a difference for the workers there, and which responsibility lies at what place?
Yes. Okay. The living tariff can have impacts in countries like Indonesia, where gig economies are really thriving. Like, based on the conversation that I have with the multiple gig workers, more about skilled freelancer could use this information on living tariff when it comes to negotiating tariff directly with the client. But there might be other workers that do not have the bargaining position to negotiate directly with their employer or their platforms, like the one in transportation. However, the information can also be used by online drivers association or union to advocate to the platform for the fair wages, or to the government for the policy of the decent work for the workers, for the informal workers in general. And for some people that I interviewed while explaining the tools, they argue it also did help them to become more aware about the workers' right under the labor law, like annual leave and social security, which before they do not consider, because they feel they are not a part of the formal workers that is covered by the labor law. And as for the other stakeholders, such as civil society organization, the living tariff has the potential to raise awareness among gig workers on a fair tariff, and it serves as, I don't want to say benchmark, but minimum tariff. And then to advocate to the government bodies, to the policymakers, to the platform companies for setting the decent tariff. And this then can also contribute to a broader government regulation or law that address the unique challenges faced by the self-employed, including those gig workers. So it will be a lot of debate and discussion going on, but these tools can serve. The information about living tariff can have that resources for the gig worker to advocate more.
Yeah, thank you very much. And Anne, what are your thoughts about, also from the Kenya perspective?
Yeah, I think it will be particularly useful for the platform-based gig workers, people like ride-hailing services, people who deliver little parcels or couriers. This would give them, like, it's often very challenging to establish what are fair compensation rates to be able to live a decent life. And so this will work extremely well for them. I think it also works well for freelancers who work on project per project basis. It's often very hard to be able to establish what constitutes a fair pay, and so this will help be able to just wrap your mind around that and be able to come up with what constitutes a fair pay. And also just for microtaskers, people who do small little bits of tasks, you might not really be able to know what, you've done a few bits of tasks here and there, you don't know what constitutes like a good income, decent living wage. And so this might be particularly helpful for them. And just low income earners, or what you'd call low income gig workers, those who get very low income, maybe because of the geographic penalty that we face. So this will help them understand and even just argue out their wages. And yeah, it is a bottom line, not a benchmark.
Yeah, thanks for that. And also Iskar, so in the end, your point was quite clear. Okay, in the end, governments needs to lead, it needs to be secured in law. And of course, you're a lawyer, so I really understand from that. But that's of course always a long way to go. So at what way in the process from where we are right now till when it's secured, let's see, it's still in the image, within the government's bodies and also regulation. So at what way do you think the living tariff can contribute in that?
I think yes, it's useful for the workers, especially the online workers. But at the same time, yes, the trade unions, they once they are trying to unionize the platform workers, they can use the tool. Although in our country, in Pakistan, self-employed workers cannot unionize legally. So it's difficult, but yes, unions can use such a tool, and when we talk to them, yes, they really liked it, because yes, the good thing about this is that it really brings out all the small details that a person would spend their time on, and since they are spending their time on, it means that they are not doing the work at that moment which they could have used to make a living. Similarly, with the government, yes, when we talked, they were of the view that this is a wonderful tool, but the question is how much they are willing to use it to improve the minimum wages for workers, because the actual step that we are asking the governments is not to like it. Now we are asking them to act on it, and if they can show their willingness to act only by legislation.
Yeah, agree on that. And I think in the end, where the tools can help, because many governments they're ignoring the labor conditions of precarious workers, especially also when you look at the domestic services, domestic work. So I think this maybe can give them some uncomfortable feeling by showing us the the evidence of, okay, this is what it should be, and then from there it's a political choice on what they do with it or not. But I think by forcing them, by giving them the numbers to make a decision, I think is already a really good first step. There were also some question, and I see also Pauline is also really good in already giving answers. One of them was also about the working time, which and also multi-homing, which is I think the $1 million question within the gig economy. Because workers they can have multiple apps open, and the question is, okay, what is working time? So how do you define what's an hour of work? Is this the worker being online and waiting for a gig, or just only in the execution of a gig? Maybe Nadia, is it something where you can share some more insights about?
Yes, that is for Mohammed, right? Oh, okay, Mohammed. Working in a multiple platform in that scenario, well, the tool itself is focusing more on the type of jobs, so not the multiple platforms. So the things that the user can do is that they can select the type of jobs that is most related to them, and then calculate the working hours that they are putting into those type of job, those one job, and then you can go back to the other to start over the tools and then pick another type of job. But so we're not focusing on the platforms, but more on the type of job that they are currently doing.
Yeah.
If you have multiple jobs, but yeah.
Yeah, good. Thank you for that. And I think also about the waiting time. So what we did, we made a estimation of waiting time, and of course it really depends on the kind of work you do, but also on the demand and supply at the moment within the region where you're working. So let's say when 50 workers log in at the same time, then waiting time will go up. But this is also what you also can add in the third page of the tool. If you think the waiting time that we are added to the tool is too high or too low, you can also add it for your own situation, because there is no average waiting time for all gig work, because it really depends per minute most of the time. So it also makes it also a challenging debate in this. And also, what Simon also now says in the chats, during waiting time, you can also continue other work, and therefore it's less realistic to include. That really depends also per situation. So in some cases, you're absolutely right. At other cases, it's a different case, which also makes, of course, the whole gig debate as a kind of a one phenomenon of work really hard, where you also really need to really look into the different kinds of situations in that. And Simon says, please look at the comment before. One moment, working time should look at when a job is accepted and their time to get to the job, time for the job. I think that's maybe we can have another webinar on working time, because there are different discussion variables on that. But Simon, it's good that you mentioned this also.
Because it's really a topic, let's say, the unpaid time. Because if you're locked in a job and you can't do another job, then then basically in the end you can't sleep, because you still have to try to earn some money. And the whole tool is, of course, to make sure that people stay alive with a living tariff. I mean, it's about staying alive. So, and I feel that some of the jobs where we put now, let's say, the working time, it might be too low. So let's challenge everybody to see whether that is enough, because now we took usually 2-3 minutes per hour, and sometimes the waiting time might be way higher. I'm jumping in your panel.
Welcome, Pauline.
So it's not on purpose. So if you want to continue, if you have more topics to discuss, please do. Feel free.
Yeah, I think maybe it's nice just to also look to some of the questions in the chats. Maybe from Claire. What are some intermediary steps companies could take to move towards living tariff, and what might be some benefits to the companies?
Well, can I explain some experience from some platforms who buy our living wages? Since a couple of years, they buy the living wages, but we argued that living wage was definitely not enough for a self-employed platform worker. So then we started to collect data for, let's say, the cost of a bike, the cost of a car, the fuel, the helmet, etc. So therefore, we could create a living wage plus occupational cost related items in general. So per hour, what is the cost if you buy a new laptop? What is then the cost per hour? What do you need? So that's what we did. But finally, real platforms, if they work with self-employed, they need to do more. And I think Iftikhar explained that very precise. You need to take care for, let's say, for the pension, for the social security. And if you do it proper, as very expensive consultants do, then you check also, let's say, admin time, acquisition time, training time. And we here together, we can't say that a gig worker doesn't need training time or acquisition time. Of course not. I mean, you need it. So it becomes part of your tariff. And so if platform companies would like to go for, let's say, a living tariff or step by step, let them come to WageIndicator and we discuss together how to do it. It's not that we force anyone to do whatever, but we hope you go home with better ideas. We are about data and fairness and not about telling you what to do. That's what you can use. I think, isn't it?
That's combined with a nice Dutch being direct approach, which works.
Yes,
Iftikhar, I see you also have your hand raised in the panel.
Yeah, I had raised my hand some time ago, but and I think it has been explained by Pauline already. The waiting time. No, I believe ride-hailing workers can't work on anything during waiting time. They have to keep the phone in their hand. They have to respond in 5 seconds. No, it is not. You can't do anything. You can't even look away.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Yes.
Thanks for this. And also what Simon also said in the chat that Uber is also changing the way they calculate waiting time in the UK, but that was also because the result of a court case that's taxi riders for Uber in the UK are now workers and not independent contractors or employees. So it's a kind of a in-between category. There was another question from Jess. Just to check what is average variation between minimum wage and wage as per living tariff per platform. Who wants to answer this one?
Rough, very rough, and it really depends per country. But you might say that in a country between the minimum wage and the living wage is very often between 20 and 60% already. And from a living wage to a living tariff, very often it doubles. So if a living wage is 10, then a living tariff might be 20. So in general, you can't say that. It depends on which job, what type of tax brackets you have. We welcome you to come and talk with us by email, and then we give you answers. And we have all kinds of cool tools, and then you can check it a bit. In general, it's impossible to answer that. But there is a clear difference between the living tariff and the living wage, and a gig worker should not rely on the living wage because it's bluntly not enough. Whether it's in Togo or in the Netherlands, it's just not enough.
Yeah.
So that should, I think the Living Tariff Tool will show that's enough, that you can't get away with a minimum wage or a living wage. You need more because these people have no boss, thank God. But since they have no boss, they need to do it themselves.
Yeah.
One thing I would like to say, no, they have a boss. They have a boss who does not want to take responsibility.
Okay,
they have a
then
boss.
It's a nasty boss. Yes. But most of the time they're seen as self-employed, and then because if they're seen as self-employed, they should act as self-employed, and because of that, negotiate to get enough not to die.
Yeah. Agree, and that's also and what you also see in discussion, and I also really like all the questions and comments within the chat, because this also really shows that's only talking about, okay, so what do we think is a decent minimum pay for people, and how do we value work, already comes with so many good discussions and questions, which make it complex, but don't let complexity be the argument of not doing things, because in the end we need to fix.
No, and I would say
also.
we invite everybody to look at the numbers, and if you think it should be different or better, come and discuss, as we do all the time with living wages and so we have fierce discussions whether the numbers are good or should be better. But we're pretty confident because the complaints, there are not that many complaints, or hardly not. So come and challenge our team to come with better numbers, especially the minutes related to waiting time. These might be the weakest spot of the living tariff at the moment. So therefore, to have more input on that, I think it's fine.
Yeah, agree.
Social security is fine, Iftikhar.
And
That's
also,
right.
and also know that in March we will also organize a webinar about unpaid labor in the gig economy. So we can
Yeah.
have another 1.5 2 hour discussion on that. Maybe also because I'm also going to close the panel. Maybe also some last thoughts or remarks. Anne, do you want to start? Is there something that you want to share or things that you just came up with during this lively discussion?
So for me, it's just, I think the living tariff is certainly a step in the right direction, mostly because it empowers workers to be able to negotiate, and it also will help in the, aiding in policy and regulation, which is a very big issue in the Kenyan economy. And especially since we also have the geographic penalty disadvantage. And so this all adds into issues of just being able to establish what a fair living wage or a living tariff should be. So how the living tariff plays into our Kenyan gig economy is that it will help also promote transparency and also just accountability between all parties involved, and also establish what could be a fair wage and just better living standards for our gig workers, and especially for people who are coming into the gig economy landscape and are looking forward to be able to just get a living out of this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And Nadia.
So maybe, well, to all the gig workers out there, please make use of the Living Tariff Tool. Maybe that's it. Because, while it may not be an instant solution for all the issues in the gig economy, it can be a powerful resources for the gig workers, and for the government also to discuss about the policy of the gig workers. And of course, the success of this lies in the collective commitment from all of the stakeholders involved in this to make sure that fair workers' right in this evolving landscape of the gig economy, I think. Yes.
Okay, thank you. And Iftikhar?
Yes, I do agree with both the panelists. It is quite useful for the workers, and it's in line with what the Wage Indicator has been doing for the last 3 decades, to share the information with people so that they can use it to claim their rights. So it's a wonderful tool, and I hope the governments and the unions would use it to bring the changes that are needed in the legislation in how to do the work.
Okay, thanks very much, all and all three, and of course also Plin. Of course, thanks also for the contribution. Maybe we can have kind of a virtual applause. Maybe that will be the next feature for Zoom to implement. So what I take also away from this discussion is that the living tariffs sets a benchmark or a minimum bar of how gig work should be paid at minimum. This is also really independent of the legal relationship between the worker and the platform, and also if there is a platform involved within the transaction, yes or no. Also, what I also learned is that also workers with unique skills, they can use the living tariff tool to negotiate with their clients. After all, they have the bargaining space, and for workers with more commodity skills, the living tariff tool is also a benchmark for policymakers and unions to make policies and regulations on how workers should be properly rewarded. And in the end, I think that's the conclusion of, I think, all the contributions. It's the responsibility of all stakeholders involved to engage with this and make it a success. So I also really welcome you also after this webinar to continue the discussion and the debate, and also see that, as we also say, also the living tariff tool is not perfect, and it's also a kind of a living tool. But in the end, it also facilitates the discussion on what we think is a fair pay. So thanks for you all, and I give the word back to Pauline.
Thanks, Martijn. Thanks for a nice panel. Well, and the tool, of course, it can't change the whole world. We have to do that together. Let's say, tool in itself is just a tool, but it can have some lovely smartness in it, and then step by step, open eyes of people, and that's what at Wage Indicator side we love that to have the tools where we started with the salary checkers as well for women, where women finally could see, thank God they could earn some money as well and don't have to look only at the remuneration of men. So it is an empowerment tool for sure, or an awareness tool for sure, and it can change ideas about how to look at tax systems and how to change governments, where it will happen in Pakistan as long as Iftikhar is there, I'm sure. And it also will happen in Kenya, where the trade union in Kenya is very keen with this tool to go to the government and to say, look, this is how we should think about tax systems for gig workers. So that is good. That I would say it's enjoyable. And yes, there will be mistakes because the tool itself is enormous complex. It's so there's so many options where you can make a mistake. But let's see, we feel invited to find the mistakes in the tool or to improve it on all kind of levels.